everyone, and welcome to our, finally, we're ecstatic, the meeting of the Hanahan Citizens Committee with the Berkeley County School District. And thank you to members of our community for coming out tonight. 6 o'clock during the summer is a tough call, but thank you for coming out tonight. The meeting tonight is a workshop type of session for the Citizens Committee with the representatives of the staff of the Berkeley County School District. It's open to the public to observe, and there are comment cards at the back table. I meant to ask your name.
Me? Oh, I'm Jordan.
Jordan has inquiry and comment cards and pens. So during the course of the meeting, anything that you think of that you want to let us know about or have a question about, please give to Jordan. There'll be no interaction between the members of the community and the committee and the board. We're just excited to be here, and I'll start off with our committee introducing themselves. I'm Patricia Hanlon-Eckstein, the chair of the Citizens Committee for the City of Hanahan.
I'm Bruin Robinson, and I also live in Tanner Plantation.
Bill Healy, I live in Iris Glade.
I'm Kevin Hedgepeth, and I live in Charleston Oaks.
Jason Brooks, Tanner Plantation.
Christina Brooks, Tanner Plantation.
Dave Pelletier, Iris Glade.
Evelyn Pelletier, Iris Glade.
Kathy Carr, Old Hanahan.
Al Calafiore, Iris Glade.
Archie Franchine, Deputy Superintendent, Berkeley County School District.
Connie Myers, Director of Facilities, Berkeley County School District.
Mike Turner, Interim Superintendent, Berkeley County School District.
Charlie Davis, former Hanahan principal, now with the Berkeley County School District.
Deion Jackson, Chief Administrative Officer, Berkeley County School District.
Mac McQuillan, Berkeley County School Board for District 2.
Jim Hayes, Berkeley County School District 9.
I'm Barbara Brown. I live in Hanahan on the Citizens Committee.
I'm Jim Rowan, I live in Iris Glade. I have a few more people if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
This is Mr. Herman Gaither, who is our facilitator for the evening. He's a former superintendent at Beaufort County School District and has done this kind of work with groups many times before. We also have our 3 principals from Hanahan, and we have Tom Sparkman from Hanahan Elementary School. We have Robin Rogers from Hanahan Middle School. And we have Rick Raycroft, who is from Hanahan High School. I didn't order them to be here this evening. They wanted to be here this evening.
We wanted to ask them to be here this evening, so thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm Herman Gaither, a retired superintendent. I spent my career in Beaufort County, South Carolina. Done about 40 building programs, about $500 million worth of projects. And since retiring, has been working with various districts throughout the state with things like this, and referendums and school locations. Generally, there are 3 big things that have to happen when you are looking to build a school. Big hard tasks are to show the need, and obviously you have done that because you have a school that's overcrowded and so forth. The second big thing is to find the money. You have been very successful at having a successful referendum, so you have the money. The third thing is to find the location. You've also done that. So we're down at the point of putting the last details in this, and the purpose of this meeting tonight would be to facilitate a discussion that hopefully removes or get us to the point that we can start to remove the barriers so we can move ahead with the construction of a much needed elementary school. And to get us up to where we are now, there's a presentation by both the Berkeley County School District and by the Citizens Committee. And once those are completed, then I'll come back up and see can we get this discussion underway.
I've already found one typo, so forgive me.
That's a me.
Here we go. All right, we have a representation of through Google Maps, overlapping each other, of Hanahan, Lower Berkeley County, Daniel Island, and Cane Hoy, and the approximate geographic area of both Hanahan and the Cane Hoy Plantation. Tanner is unusual. The Tanner Foster Creek Area Elementary School is unusual. Out of the 5 new schools, it's the only school that's being built in an existing area that wasn't included in a planned development. The school was not planned at the time Tanner was developed. And at that time, back then, Goose Creek Primary School was under consideration, so who knew that so many of us would move into the Tanner area. I'm a firm believer in being a team, and so is the members of our committee. And we understand from Mrs. Schwab's presentation at the last meeting, you don't want to be in the road construction business. Unfortunately, the state of South Carolina puts you in that business when it comes to locating new schools. But all working together as a team, we can get a lot of things done. This is the site that was presented to the public back in late January for the placement of the school. And the yellow is the 15 free acres that the city has offered. Where the school is located, I'm not used to this laser, so I'm not going to use it, is the city property that was selected by the school district from the request for proposals. And this lower parcel here where the staff parking and visitor parking is part of a 10+ acre parcel that the negotiations just couldn't be completed for a couple of issues. That's where the school district at the time came back and asked the city, our understanding, for just 6 free acres of land. And it's approximate. I did the best that I could. But we too share what board chair at the time, Ken Murray, the representative for the majority of Hanahan, felt that this is a good location. All the due diligence has been completed. There's been no major problems with it. Our charge from Mayor Blackwell, who is in the audience tonight, and asking for the volunteer committee, was to come up with a location. And we think this is suitable and it's also available. The design of the school, just so everybody can remember what it looks like. It also has room for expansion. The second floor would go over the perpendicular angled wing coming from the gymnasium and cafeteria areas. And it's been 2.5 years since the referendum was approved, and we're glad Nexton is opened. I read through so many of those agreements and development agreements. There was no way to keep track of everything that was going on and so many owners. But Nexton's open. We know you're working on Fox Bank. Philip Simmons KA is going great, and the high school site. So we know it's bad. We know the classes are crowded. We are so anxious to get that shovel in the ground. Back in the hearing in December of 2013, the attorney for the school district, George Bullwinkle, in his presentation discussed deed restrictions, and this is the only thing we're going to go back to the Bowen property about, how to incorporate deed restrictions. And it was unique to this set of negotiations, as we'll see with some of the others. But also in Hanahan, there's a unique set of circumstances to be included in that, and we have no recommendations at all as to what those discussions should be. Trust. We do have trust in the reliability of the school district, and by having this exchange now, we're strengthening that trust. In the deed restrictions for Philip Simmons, the K-8 school, and the purchase agreement, there is contingent upon 25 free acres, automatic enrollment rights for any students in grades K through 8 in that part of the King Hoy area. And then in a letter sent from the school district attorney to Hanahan, they said the proposed contract was consistent but we didn't find it was consistent, at least in the one in February that was sent to the city. We've done a lot of homework, and I never want to read attorney contracts again. Forgive me for any attorneys who are in there, but so we're just looking for the same principles and a weighing of the prior precedents to this unique situation in Hanahan. Again, this is the meeting on March 10th, and we're glad the board took some action and brought 3 proposals, to the rest of the members. And we do understand your need for certain authority, but again, we need to go back and look at all the other contracts, recent contracts that have been done. And we thank Dr. Murray. He's communicated freely with our members. Well, we've looked, anytime you do something different, it's a precedent. So in each individual case, Cane Bay was one of the first major developments to really have an impact in the northern area, or central area, I guess would be better to say, of Berkeley County. So in that one, we have a shared use agreement for the school complex for residents of Cane Bay, except for the high school stadium. The district, in exchange for the free land for the 3 schools, building a $1.7 million 4-lane boulevard that I don't know what in today's dollar value that would be worth. And other considerations of utilities and access to walking trails that were in that agreement. Each one's a little bit different. For Daniel Island, the K-8 restriction for 25 years. The district constructs the Blakely Street extension, and the developer constructs sidewalks along Daniel Island Drive. The district grading, grassing, and irrigating the park property for future fields, and providing the irrigation. The city was going to pay the water bill. And the shared use agreement between Berkeley County School District and the City of Charleston for the school gym, for use of the school gym and recreation fields, which Dr. Murray said was a nightmare. So I'm sure it's the same up at Cane Bay, and from our understanding, Hanahan's not requesting anything like that. Precedent setting is building the Philip Simmons School as a K-8, a grade 5 component from the referendum, and the high school, the grade 4 component, not approved by voters, being paid through annual budget allocations from a bond. And as I understand it, the one side of the school is the middle, the other side is the elementary level, and the core and the center are the shared facilities, if I read that all correctly. Also unique to Cane Hoy, and it is not in any of the others, is the purchase price for the 111 acres for the high school is $4.8 million. $269,000 to purchase 25 acres for the K-8 site plus 25 free acres. And then another 1.1 million extra, 20% of the total purchase price to cover all road construction, which the developer Cane Hoy Plantation will do and is required to do in order for the City of Charleston to issue their permits and to grant their approvals. It's what the City of Charleston wanted. And in here you can see where the red area is the high school, the lower area in blue is the middle school, and then the lime green yellow line coming in is the access road into the district. And as I read it too, the existing timber roads are being used by the school district to do the construction right now. The hope, we believe that something can happen, especially something that seems possible or likely, and getting this deal done really appears to be very close. There have been 7 contract proposals according to our count. May have missed 1 or 2 in there, 5 from BSCD, 2 from the city, and a 3rd one is ready from the city. The Citizens Committee brokered some major concessions from the city on March 5th and proposed a compromise. And that was the district would relinquish the land reversion clause if the site is no longer used for a school for a 25-year period, which is consistent. We've seen them in all the other contracts. Liquidated damages to be paid by the school district if Hanahan students zoned out of Hanahan schools. It was a suggestion and an idea, I believe, from Dr. Thompson. The dollar amounts on where it started and where it ended up vary as to what that liquidated damages, or otherwise called penalty, would be. It was an attempt of the district to prove we don't want to spend taxpayers' money, so we won't seek to, we don't want to be penalized. We don't want to spend our money on that, as an assurance to the city that students would not be zoned out. And Citizens Committee recommended an arbitration process if the district had to move students out. If the city felt that it was not within the realm of what they thought would be appropriate, that was accepted by both the school district and the city in 3 versions of a deed restriction concession compromise contract presented to the board on March 10th. We didn't get to see them before the vote, and I think that's what made the March 10th meeting a little bit frustrating and contentious, but time heals all things. We just believe now at this point the city and the district need to return to the table. We understand the concern for autonomy. You have your responsibilities. The district has their responsibilities. And as we've gone through the other contracts, we can see that how they've been reflected. But we do believe that there needs to be a concerted, earnest effort to come back to the table. Let's put some things on that what worked in other contracts and see if we can't pull out some of the good things that'll work, some of the things that would not be appropriate, and come to a resolution on this. We're that close. And we understand with everything that's been going on with the district and the changes in leadership that was also a major factor in the delay. It was not an unwillingness to get together on this. This was from one of our residents at the December 3rd rezoning hearing in 2013. And I think that still is the mantra of the school district officials, the citizens, and the city, that we all need to work together. And that's the end of our presentation. We have hope and promise, and we hope we can just put an exclamation point on that and put the signs back out again to say we're done and over with. And that's our presentation. Thank you.
School district.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to echo that we now have been in this 2.5 years. I am 5 weeks as interim superintendent of Berkeley County School District. 5 weeks. However, I've been in the school district in one form or another since 1998. I was chief instructional officer for many years. Actually taught 4 different schools in the school district after I retired, and have come back as an administrator 3 times coming back, 4 times altogether. Came back for a few months one time, came back for 2 years for Chester Floyd, assistant superintendent of instruction, and now I'm back as interim superintendent. The point of my saying that to you is that I know an awful lot about Berkeley County School District. In 1998, the first principal I visited was Charlie Davis here, who was principal of Hanahan High School. He called me to come to Hanahan High School to meet the first teacher I met in Berkeley County School District, who happened to be Minnie Blackwell. That's the truth. And he wanted me to know what Minnie Blackwell was doing, and she was working with at-risk 8th grade students who were trying to rise into the high school, and those were her kids. And you should have heard her passion about those kids. So I am a person who has worked with instructional programs mostly through my entire career to try to build these schools. somebody has asked me not too long ago, well, what has Berkeley County School District done for Hanahan schools recently? And I'll tell you this, 1998 to now, just the physical plants of the 3 schools that are here is an unbelievable transformation in those 15 years. Unbelievable. I remember moving out of Fishburne Elementary at Christmas to helping with the move of all the teachers and all the kids and all the boxes and everything into a brand new facility. It was amazing. The teachers left notes to the people coming behind them about the rats in the building. True. That's the truth. And we've had almost doubling in size of the middle school, and of course the high school has had an unbelievable renovation. And I think a wonderful auditorium for the community. That's one thing. But one of the most important indications of the school district's support of Berkeley, of Hanahan schools, are these 3 gentlemen. They have performed wonderfully, and they have had most of them have had long careers in the Hanahan schools. And if you ask them what Mike Turner, because this is really personal, education is a personal business, what Mike Turner had to do with each of them in terms of where their school was and what kind of resources we brought to bear at different points in time, they'll tell you. And I just want you to know that this isn't sort of like the school district versus the Hanahan school. We have a fully integrated approach to trying to do things for our kids in Berkeley County, and we work together and have worked together all those years. And that's what has been, I think, one of the key factors in the success of the schools, not only here, but around Berkeley County School District. The other thing I would like to tell you is I have read in those 5 weeks every FOI request. And I just want you to know, this is what
we've done.
She requested all of these documents be we've given them and we've done them, etc. This was done before I came. Make sure everybody had all the information they needed about Berkeley County School District, what we were about, as if we would not share it. And we didn't charge a dime for any of the paperwork and the copying and the time of people to copy all these records so that this committee could read those records. Were you ever charged a dime?
No.
And the law allows us to do that, and we didn't do it.
And we were ready if you did.
Okay, I understand. But I just want to point out that this is not adversarial. It really doesn't need to be. The other thing I want to tell you is that as I've read the record through this 2.5 years and all the properties that have been discussed and all of the kinds of things that went back and forth with regard to the school district and the city and all the other entities involved, there is a record here of this school district making concession after concession after concession. And the Board of Education, unbelievably, you're not going to believe I'm going to say this because the chair of my board and one of my members of the board is here. They're my bosses, but I'm going to say it. I could not believe when I read the concession they made with regard to this school in terms of the deed restrictions they are going to put on this school. I couldn't believe they made that concession. I wouldn't have advised it myself. I'm being honest with you. I wouldn't have advised it, and they did. And I think we're going to be okay about it. I don't think we're going to regret it. But it's very, very unusual to see that. With that said, I'm going to turn this over to my Chief Administrative Officer, who has a few things he wants to tell you.
Which concession are you talking about? Sorry, sir, for clarification.
The concession?
Which one did you?
The deed restrictions, there's only one that we're really talking about, and that's with regard to the enrollment of the students from Hanahan, only in Hanahan schools, etc. And
we'll get to that.
Other issues later, but
In
we're
our-
not really.
Point of clarification.
in our discussion. And just, let me acknowledge too that 2 other council people are here, Mike Sally and Dan Owens. So,
Thank you.
okay.
We're not finished with our presentation.
No, they thought that I ignored them.
No problem. Go ahead, Dan.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, Ms. Exxon did such a great, thorough job during her presentation. It actually covered, I'll show you, covered a lot of what I talked about, which was the sequence of events. And I know we wanted to go through that quickly so we can get up to speed, get up to current day, so we can move forward and progress past all of this. But what you have here is the same information that Ms. Eckstein spoke about. And you can find all of it on our website under community, and then Tanner Foster Creek School. All of this information here is listed. Continue to go down. This is currently the property that we're talking about now. As Ms. Eckstein said, this is the Williams Lane 2 property, and this is the federal property. This is the Myers property that she referenced earlier, the 10 plus or so acres that we had some issues with. But this is the location that we're dealing with now. And I guess we can come back to this. We're going to talk about the agreement a little bit later. But this is found in the contract under Exhibit C, Contract 3A, items 1 through E. And I guess we can come back to that. It's, I guess, a list of concessions, as you would call it. All right. And what we have here, this is the attendance proposal, proposed attendance area. This is the same attendance lines that were presented in March, the March 10th meeting at Hanahan Middle School, and was voted on by was passed through the first reading by the board. And it's a little bit fuzzy, but again, this is found online. Basically, all of this area, the area that you see here highlighted in yellow, this is all Hanahan. And all this area is proposed to go to the new Tanner Foster Creek School once we get it built and open.
Could you talk about those other two areas at the top up there?
Which areas?
The orange one is also in the attendance area for the new school, and that's in the city of Hanahan, right?
That's correct.
And then the other one on the right side, that piece of property there, that's in the attendance area, but it is not in the city.
Right. So currently, I guess, yeah, that is a good point. Thank you, Dr. Turner. Point Dr. Turner is trying to make, wants me to make, is these two areas here. If you look at the old attendance line, these schools are in the city of Hanahan, but they're currently zoned to go to Goose Creek schools. And the same here. These students are currently living in the city of Hanahan. Under the current attendance lines, they're zoned to attend Goose Creek schools. So under the new attendance lines, they would go to Hanahan schools. Hanahan schools all three. Excuse me, with the exception of here. And this is not, that's actually not Goose Creek. I mean, excuse me, not Hanahan.
One last comment. Sure. I'd like to say this to the committee, and in all sincerity. Please, for the sake of the children, I do not want 2 more years of children to be in portable buildings. They're relatively safe, but they're not as safe as a permanent facility.
Totally.
And we would already have those children in the building this August if we had moved expeditiously with this whole process. And I don't want to see us go beyond 2017 to have those children in a building, a permanent building. There are 2 things I'm worried about: safety and also weather. And I would think we need to go ahead and move forward for the children's sake. I'm asking you, please help us any way you can to get this done. We want to see the children in that building. Thank you.
Let us also say we feel exactly the same way, and I expressed that to Archie when he was going to be chairing this group, that we would hope this is just the only meeting. Maybe there's something down the road to find details, but we have the same expectation.
Thank you.
Based on the 2 presentations, you have done 99% of the work, but maybe the devil is in the details in this instance. You've agreed on price, you've agreed on location, you've agreed on everything, and now we're down to restrictions with respect to attendance. So, South Carolina law says that every child in a school district has to have access to schools in that district. a district may not prohibit students from going into anyone. It empowers the Board of Education to establish attendance zones, basically for logistics, efficiency, program, or convenience. So the board does that, and most of the time the board tries to do that in a manner so that students remain in close proximity to their central locations. And most places, elementaries are neighborhood schools, high schools are area schools, and middle schools are area schools, and high schools are regional. That simply means you start at the top with your flagship, which is the high school, and then into your middle schools, and then into multiple elementary schools. It would appear that we are down to the point now of trying to get language that allows the board to function inside of their authority as the established people who establish attendance zones, and to give some comfort to those folks who want to make sure that those zones are inclusive of certain populations. And so the only thing there is that attendance to a school may not be prohibited. That is, you cannot prohibit a student from going to an individual school. You can't segregate, you can't discriminate, but when you're putting together the attendance zone, it has to be around those four factors that I said before. Logistics means for things like transportation. You know, you want your students to attend the school. Normally, if you attend the school outside of a assigned attendance zone, transportation does not become the district's responsibility. Okay, so that takes your logistics. When you look at efficiency, if you're trying to minimize the time that students spend on the school bus or the distance that students have to go from home to schools, you build your attendance zones around that. Or if you're looking at program, you can build it, if you have a magnet school or school of choice or something like that, you can have your attendance zones to be flexible enough to allow you to do those things. So it would appear that we're down now to the technical piece of how we define the attendance zones, and if there are how we can do that, allow the board to have the authority that they are given by state law, and at the same time afford some comfort for the community. Have I summarized that pretty much?
Very well.
Okay, then let's have the discussion proceed from this point. And, you know, yes, sir.
Well, I had a question regarding that. Since it's only really related to the attendance lines, which they've done a really good job at creating this, there is a trust factor here, which hopefully we get down. When I thought about this, and we said we'd try to be fair, when I ran my departments in that small bank I worked for, I wouldn't want another bank coming in and telling me what to do. I wouldn't. The same way I know that our city council wouldn't want Goose Creek coming in and telling them what to do. We need to think out of the box on this, and this is our only hold-up point. If I'm not mistaken, I would ask that of the board, the two representatives, right? Is the attendance, is us telling you that you cannot change the attendance lines. Is that our only sticking point that this, would we say? I think it is, because I've heard that many times.
Well, we just can speak as one member of the
Yes.
board, not the whole
Right.
board, so it's not, doesn't necessarily matter what we individually think, it's what we as a board think.
Let me speak right now, because it's you're making it difficult for these two board members, even the chair of my board, because they can't speak for the board. They can't speak for the, since I'm the chief executive officer of the district, I can speak for the district. They can't speak for their board, so you're making it difficult for them. If I mess up, they'll probably tug my shirt here and tell me. But the way I see this is that the deed restrictions that were written into the first draft from the city in terms of the purchase and sale agreement.
And that would be all Hanahan kids going to Hanahan schools?
Let me read it,
Okay.
maybe then. And this is part that the district board agreed to in the first instance. The conveyance of the property as contemplated by this agreement shall be subject to the following obligations and restrictions, collectively the new school property restrictive covenants, that shall run with the title of the property for a period of 50 years being the anticipated lifespan of a school building from the date of the closing, the new school property restriction period, and shall be contained in the warranty deed in all appropriate places to assure the continued enforceability of these obligations and restrictions during the restriction period, 50 years. The property shall be used for a school for residents in grades K through 12 who reside within the city limits of the city of Hanahan, as those city limits exist as of the effective date of this agreement. Hanahan residents shall be allowed to attend public schools that are located within the city limits. In other words, we can't say, no, you can't come to a school that's in the city limits. If you are, that's prohibited. Hanahan students who live outside the city limits, non-Hanahan residents, so-called, may also attend Hanahan public schools, as he was pointing out, but only if sufficient space is available after all Hanahan residents are afforded an opportunity to attend Hanahan public schools. If sufficient space is not available for all Hanahan residents at Hanahan public schools, Hanahan residents may be zoned to a school outside the city limits, but only after all non-Hanahan residents have been moved to a school outside the city limits. All right? And then it has some language with regard to the penalties, etc. What it's saying is the children who are residents of the city of Hanahan can go to schools that go to this school, because it's inside the city limits, this particular school. And the board agreed to these restrictions for this new school. The sticking point for 50 years, which I have never seen before. I have never seen that before. They agreed to those restrictions for this school only now, and it's for 50 years. The sticking point became when the other version of this sale agreement said that we had to pull the deeds of all the other school properties in Hanahan and attach the same restrictions to properties we bought, in some cases, decades ago, and apply those restrictions to all Hanahan schools. Now, I don't know if any of you have bought a piece of property for a purpose, and as you bought it, the seller told you, oh, by the way, I know you own other property in this town. I'd like you to pull your deeds so we can place some additional restrictions on other deeds of property you already own. I know all of you want us to be businesslike in the school district. That's not businesslike. That's heavy-handed. You know, because we have not, if you look, Hanahan Elementary, Hanahan Middle, and Hanahan High School. I don't think that we have rezoned any of those schools. I know since 1998, that's when I'm here. And before that, in other words, they're backed up, you're backed up there. I don't understand why, when you talk about trust us on our behavior as a district and the way we've taken care of these children and other children in this district. I do not understand why someone would demand that kind of deed restriction on all the other properties that are unconnected to this event. Let us build this school. The board has already conceded, made a huge concession here for 50 years with regard to the attendance, these attendance restrictions for this particular school. I think that's enough. And in addition to that, the other concessions are more than $2 million of additional work in terms of infrastructure, including bringing all the utilities right up to the line in the federal property so the city can hook on to make its recreational complex on the other side, which is to the benefit of the children. But still, I have not seen that amount of concession with regard to a school and all of the kinds of improvements we have to make to the roads. An 8-foot wide sidewalk, I've never seen that before. I think that's so 2 golf courts can go both ways on a sidewalk. Really, I think people want to take their children to school in a golf cart. And that's fine. What I'm saying is we've agreed to all of those concessions, to those extraordinary things. And this is the only thing that is giving us difficulty. And our board, I do not believe, as Chief Executive Officer, I do not believe our board will ever agree to give up its authority with regard to all of these other schools in terms of deed restrictions on every other piece of property.
Which is where I was going with this statement. So let me finish. So as chief executive and 2 board members here, if we asked you, now the commitment was always all Hanahan children go to Hanahan schools. That was a commitment. It's been made in multiple meetings. Okay, and everybody's agreed to that. Except it can be changed at any time. We don't want to take away your authority or your power. That's not part of the game here. Okay, this is to get the kids in the schools. That's all this is about. If you were to pass a ruling on your attendance line saying that, yes, it has to pass with majority vote, but all representatives of that district must also vote yes for it. If any district representative, say Hanahan has 3, right? Mr. McClellan is one of them, says no, then it doesn't pass. If you were to do that, I think we could get our city to agree. I think that 3 people, if you needed to really change that attendance line, and you were faithful to the city and went to them and everything, and you all agreed, I think that's a win-win. We got to go out of the box. I agree with you, Dr. Turner. We're going to sit here over the same issue over and over again. You have the control now. You've protected not only Hanahan, you're protecting each one of your districts too, also. What do you think of something like that? I would ask the board members because they vote on that. Would they be acceptable to that? You can answer for the remaining ones that didn't attend.
You can't have a partial vote of the board for any action of the board that has legal authority. It must be a majority of the board present.
I said that.
Okay, it can't be.
I said that, but I said with the inclusion that all district people must have said yes.
That's
Well, that may be difficult, but the board could agree that the students living in Hanahan would have first dibs, first access to schools in Hanahan.
How would you propose to make that?
It's pretty much general. I mean, you could just do that in a general motion, because when you draw attendance zones, those attendance zones are built around a school, wherever the central location of that school is. In this instance, the location is here, so the students in the immediate vicinity around that have first dibs at that school.
Mr. Gay, I agree with you. That would be the greatest way to do it. It would be easy. Let's all go out, have dinner or something. But how do you guarantee that next year, or when the board changes, when we have new elected officials?
You can put that in the form of a resolution, as opposed to the deed restriction. The deed restriction is going to be binding from a strictly technical point, okay? But the board could resolve that students living in the immediate vicinity of any school in the district has the first priorities to schools in that district. That's basically the way you do attendance zones.
Well, the issue with that is if you put the map of the attendance lines back up, at the very top corner where he was calling out the orange spot on the top corner, if you look up there, there's a Goose Creek Primary School less than half a block from the very top of that city limits of Hanahan. So if you say, by resolution of the board, if you live within 2 miles of a school, you've got the first right to go to that school. You're basically forcing the people in the northern side of Hanahan there to go to Goose Creek Primary, which is happening now.
Let's go back to a question then of capacity. When we look at the point, when that school is built, will it be at capacity?
no.
Okay. Is the Goose Creek Elementary at capacity?
Yes.
Over capacity.
Over capacity.
But it will not be once the school is built and children moved in. Is that
We're
what
talking
you're
about
saying?
this school, and the board's already agreed that they would give you those deed restrictions on that school only for 50 years, if we will just come to an agreement. That school.
I'm
Just like
agreeing
you're
with you,
talking
but we're also talking about all of Hanahan. That's been, since day one, something that we've discussed. And we do appreciate that. The concession went down to 25 years and everything. We're saying, how do we protect the statement, all Hanahan students go to Hanahan schools? Protect that statement, which was given to us as part of the resolution, okay? Yeah, it was all verbal, it was all trust. Give us that protection. Let's think out of the box. We're all adults. There's no such thing as we can't, we can, okay? Right now, tonight, we could resolve this. Mr. Gates, I'm sure you could resolve this tonight with this.
Well,
This has gone on too long.
I want to make sure that I understood what was said here. When you talk about this resolution, you use the plural word schools. Is that correct or not?
With reference to?
This proposal, the resolution that you mentioned that could be done, okay? Did you use the word schools or school?
I'm saying that basically when you do an attendance zone, okay? When you do an attendance zone, the school in that zone becomes the center. And you throw the shrimp net out to bring in the number of students that gets you somewhere close to your capacity or so forth. And you do that for convenience or program, all the other kind of things. So the restriction here, which I have, frankly, in 45 years, never seen a board agree to guarantee that everybody in that thing will be this. If you have that concession, fine, okay? But when you look at taking that beyond that to the schools that exist currently, then I think the best you can get from the Board of Education is a resolution or a commitment that students living close to Hanahan High School would have first dibs. But now if you ended up with an influx of people and suddenly Hanahan was overpopulated by 200%, then obviously the board has to have the room to move that out for education's sake. Okay?
Would the board be willing to give a resolution, a 25-year resolution, that all Hanahan children go to Hanahan schools? That was a commitment.
Okay.
You're putting them on the spot.
Yeah.
I'm not putting anybody on the spot. What I really don't want to do is, would that be something that would be conceivable? I know we have to ask the other guys.
We have that proposal.
Yeah, I think the difficulty there is when you say all that. And go back to the example I just given. Take Hanahan High School. If suddenly you had an influx of students and you had a binding thing there that says everybody has to go to that school, even though it has capacity of 1,500, now there are 3,000 students, then obviously you have made an educational decision that is detrimental to some of those students.
I think one of the issues, though, is so you talk about if there was an influx of children into Hanahan.
Yeah, I'm just doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I think the point that we've heard talked about a lot is, number one, there's not many more places to build in Hanahan, so we're not going to have a whole bunch of more houses come into Hanahan. So I think the concern is, so for there to all of a sudden be twice as many high school students there have to be a lot of parents.
I just did that
right. So I don't think we're worried about the schools becoming over capacity because of Hanahan.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the thing is that I have to apologize when I introduced myself and I said I was a member of Tanner Plantation. I actually misrepresented myself. I actually live in the Orange area right now, where both my daughters are zoned for Goose Creek Primary. We live in Hanahan, but we're zoned for Goose Creek Primary and therefore Sedgefield and onward. So this is a very important thing to me because it determines whether my children go to Goose Creek Primary.
Your new agreement coming to the
Yes, the new agreement has those two children.
Right. Yeah. This does is assuming that. And so I guess what I'm not sure is what does it take if this was agreed to and all of a sudden and my daughters were going to go to Tanner Foster Creek Elementary, Hanahan Mid, Hanahan High, what would it take for that to change to where if the deed restriction said my daughters have to go to Tanner Plantation Elementary or wherever, but then outside of that they can go anywhere because that's not a part of the deed restriction. What assurances do I have that it won't change, that they will then go from Tanner Plantation Elementary to Sedgefield and Goose Creek High?
Let's see if I can understand your question. You live in the Orange, right?
Yes.
So you live in the city limits of Hanahan.
Yes.
If the city accepts this purchase agreement with this 50-year deed restriction that's here, since your children live in Hanahan, if you or they have children for the next 50 years, they will all go to schools that are in Hanahan.
Well, they would go to Tanner. They would go to Tanner Plantation Elementary.
Right.
But within that deed restriction, within that contract, there says nothing about middle or high school.
That's correct.
So what I'm asking is, what does it take to then change it to say, okay, well, the people in that orange area, now we're going to change the attendance lines, because this is an attendance line for Tanner Plantation Elementary. And so what I'm wondering is, what does it take to then change the attendance lines for the middle school and the high school, completely disregarding the elementary?
Well, I'm actually glad that you asked that question, and also glad that you brought up the fact of capacity for growth, residential growth within the city of Hanahan as it's currently configured. I think I may have had this conversation with someone a while ago. And I'm going to divert a little bit. As you know, we're going through a building plan, and Ms. Eckstein mentioned Philip Simmons Schools, Philip Simmons High School as well as the new Tanner Plantation School, Tanner Foster Creek School. Once those schools are built, they're being built. We're going through this construction program to relieve some of the overcrowding. It will relieve the overcrowding at Goose Creek Primary. Will relieve the overcrowding at Hanahan Middle, Hanahan Elementary, and when we build a high school, Philip Simmons High, we'll relieve the overcrowding at the high school as well. To your question, what would it take to redraw the lines? Well, it would take a tremendous amount of growth within the city of Hanahan for us to redraw the lines. For us to take students that are in Hanahan, going to Hanahan schools, to rezone them to schools that are outside of Hanahan. That would mean we have a tremendous amount of growth somewhere in this green or somewhere in this yellow.
Well, outside of Hanahan, though, if there was a tremendous amount of growth outside of Hanahan, those children then went to Hanahan High. We
wouldn't move students out of Hanahan High that are living within the city of Hanahan to bring students from outside, because down here is
But that's what you're doing right now, because there are children in Canepoy who are going to Hanahan Elementary, and I have to go to Goose Creek Primary.
Because we don't have schools over there. As far as, we don't have a high school over there.
Now, is your question, sir, if a child attends the Tanner Plantation School in the elementary, would we zone their middle school outside of city limits?
Yes.
The answer is no. Okay. We would go from Tanner to Hanahan Middle to Hanahan High.
Okay.
Okay, that's clear. Okay, so I just want to make sure you weren't confused that we have different feeder patterns, anticipated feeder patterns.
So essentially what you're saying is a deed restriction for the elementary school is almost a deed is not a deed restriction. A deed restriction for the elementary school is a commitment to all the Hanahan schools.
The feeder zones in the Hanahan schools are clear and have been clear. Have you sent all your kids to Hanahan Middle? Have your kids from Hanahan Middle always gone to Hanahan High? It's the way it is. Now, I think one of the greatest commitments you can have, the board can pass a resolution, but one of the greatest commitments you can have is community and institutional memory about what happened. If you have a resolution of the board with regard to the Hanahan schools and Hanahan residents of the city of Hanahan having first dibs on Hanahan schools in terms of a resolution of the board, everybody can refer to that. If there's ever a chance down the road that somebody else has, if there's some other change in circumstance, that can be referred to. I think that's a powerful thing. I don't think that's a lack.
Can you explain what a resolution is and how it is binding to the future?
It would be a board resolution as opposed to a legal document. It would be a board saying the board will make every effort to honor that as they go through the next board and the next board and the next board, as opposed to having it in a legal document with punitive and all the other kind of damages that would be associated with it.
But the next board wouldn't have to honor that if that change.
Yes, I mean, everybody, it's just like you hire a teacher, a board hires a teacher. The next board inherits that teacher and it's automatically responsible for that.
Could the board put a date of 25 years on that resolution, which I know it can?
The resolution, you wouldn't even need a date. A resolution is only as good as
No, they can put that it cannot be
be.
changed for 25 years in a resolution. And it's,
But again, if
do
the
we have
next
a
board
lawyer
comes,
here? Do we have a lawyer here? Can a resolution be put with a time frame on it? Can a resolution be put with a time frame on it?
I don't think one board and constrain all boards in the future, okay? You can't constrain their power to operate. It's not business-like, okay, for one thing. It's not good to do that. Okay?
Well,
It's not.
let me say this. In all of my educational experience, I've never seen a Board of Education agree to a 50-year commitment to anything. Because none of us can say what's going to be the status of this area in 5 years, let alone 50. So that's a long-term legal commitment. But I think that what you have is a structure. And let me go back to something I said earlier. Elementary schools are neighborhood by their very design. Then middle schools become area schools, taking in 1, 2, 3, or more elementary schools. And high schools are regional schools, taking in 1, 2, 3, or more. I mean, that is the way attendance zones are structured.
If there's going to be additional growth pattern, it's probably going to occur in the yellow area in some of those neighborhoods, right? And we've already agreed the yellow area is the area of most interest with regard to potential changes. We've already agreed that the kids in the upper right side who are not in the city of Hanahan, if in the future something happens, they have to go. They can't go to Hanahan School. This board has agreed to that those kids don't have a right to go to Hanahan schools if there's an overcrowding at the Tanner Plantation School of Hanahan residents. There has to be a rezoning of that group of kids already. They can't continue to go. And that's where the growth, major growth is, isn't it? It's occurring.
I would say Tanner's about 70% completed at this time, and the area of Goose Creek that now attends the primary would come into the school is
that addresses, I think, most of the concerns that people have.
I think then looking at some of the other agreements that maybe one other thing to look at for the board to look at and for the city to look at possibly is the agreement that was made for Kane Hoy in terms of the K-8. It actually is 2 schools. The letter of intent was to do 3 schools in Kane Hoy, but you've got the 2, and I think that's the concern. We can maybe even understand that the high school will never ever change. But there was an agreement, at least for a K-8 school, that is 2 separate schools over in Kane Hoy.
They're both new, huh?
They are.
They're both new,
they
just
are.
like this is a new school. We're not asking to pull a deed on a school that was built 15, 20 years ago. You know that.
Yeah.
So
it's for the consideration for negotiation between the city and the district. It's an avenue to maybe find some conciliatory common ground, but to understand that in terms of the concessions, I think that the city was under the impression, because they're not in the school business, and neither I was there or you were there, it was Mr. Cribb and Dr. Thompson.
Yes.
The 50 years is an expected lifespan of a building, and I think that's where that came from. But then, and them also looking at the other contracts, they've seen that they're 25 years, and I don't know that Dr. Thompson ever said 25 is the norm, or we'll give you 50 instead of 20. I don't know.
I don't think there's any question that the life of the school would be over in 50 years in terms of the building.
The norm is about 30.
Yes.
That's when you build a school, you build it for 30 years.
50 was to say,
right,
for sure.
And how old is Hanahan High School?
But in perpetuity was the problem before.
Right.
So 50, I guess in the school board side, was better than the words in perpetuity.
Right.
Okay.
And in terms of some of the concessions there, that's what we are saying for what was offered in that contract, that we think the school district and the city should take a look at, a comparable apples to apples.
Yes, I would appreciate it.
Of what was offered for the most recent, for the Kane Hoy but for that complex, and taking a look back at what the costs were at the time for Kane Bay and for Daniel Island. To take a look at those things. I think the 8-foot wide width may only have to do with connecting to the walking trail. And the city intends to do some
Oh,
other.
make some other change.
Yeah,
Well, that would be
goes
nice.
on Williams Lane, so,
Well,
it may
yeah.
be very good to have a board member or two, administration, the city administrator, and one or
That's
two.
what I like. However, we were asked to come speak to you
Right.
because you potentially could be our advocates to resolve this issue. And I've already asked you, please, to do that.
We will.
As a committee, please help us. I think our chairman of our board and our board member here have heard that if we could have language in terms of a general resolution of the board, emphatic with regard to this issue, Hanahan resident students in Hanahan can have first dibs on Hanahan schools, probably better language than what I just said. It would go a long way to relieving people's concerns and anxiety about that. And also, this young man's concern about what happens in the middle school and high school is also something I think that the board could think about with regard to the feeder patterns in that resolution. And then maybe people would be more relieved.
But I think, and I agree 100% with you, and I think that would be it. The challenge we're going to have with getting that is that a board member is on for a period of 4 years.
I have been in the school business for a very long time, and so has Herman. And I'm telling you, I have seen boards go back to see what the resolution was in the records 3, 5, or 10 years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong. Look in the minutes, because they didn't want to contradict an earlier board with any kind of commitment or precedent that was set. There's an amazing amount of continuity. That does not mean that there's no such thing as a rogue board. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm telling you that it doesn't, you know, it doesn't happen.
I know, but where I get confused is that the board is elected officials, okay, that are supposed to represent the needs of the community, let me finish, of both Berkeley County and the citizens of Hanahan. We're not asking you to put in a deed restriction now. We're not. Keep your deed restriction, okay? What we're asking you is for a 25-year commitment on a resolution that cannot be changed unless there's an emergency, or whatever little wording we have to do for that. Overcrowding, all of a sudden, that Hanahan decides they're going to grow another level of dirt, we're going to grab another 22,000 people in or whatever, that it's there. 25 years, Hanahan children go to Hanahan schools. That's all we ask. You do that in a resolution, and I'll go back to the council members and the mayor right here.
If that's what the feeling of your committee is, I will carry it back to our board.
Do you think it's well, though? I mean,
You can work with that.
Yes, I'll take that back to the board.
I don't think we're
If that's what you want.
agreement to cancel the deed restriction.
okay, well, the deed restriction, yeah, the
But a
elementary school.
resolution, yeah, absolutely. If there was a resolution to say along those lines.
So you're saying you don't want to cancel the deed restriction
No,
on
for
the
the other
elementary?
schools we do.
For the, right, just
The
saying.
other schools we do, not
The
the
deed restriction on the elementary school.
But it's something that.
I think we have a basis that we can move forward from there.
I think that's the only thing that
If
we're
the board
fighting.
has accepted the restriction on the elementary school.
How do we get around it?
Move forward
That's
with the
it.
elementary school.
Yes.
Can we
I
say,
think that's the key.
can we say you can get our support, but obviously there's another party that you have to get the agreement.
Right, but I was told about meeting with this, the reason we should meet with this committee is that you have an interest and an ability to influence the council, city council, that you have the ability
May I
to
share something?
influence.
May I just share something on behalf of city council? Because we spent $25,000 negotiating whether deed restrictions were even legal with the Berkeley County School District's attorney. We spent as city manager $25,000 just trying to decide whether deed restrictions were even legal. This was before we found out that they had deed restrictions on all their other schools that they've been building. So the school district knew that there were already deed restrictions on their properties. They knew that it was legal. But here's what that $25,000 got us that's perfect in this conversation. You cannot have a contract that's going to bind another board. You can have a deed restriction that's enforceable, but you can't have a contract that will bind another board. So they can do a resolution for 25 years, for 50 years, or whatever, but it's never enforceable. It's never enforceable because that's what we discovered. Through all of the case history in all of South Carolina, the ones that got thrown out of court were contracts, not deed restrictions. Deed restrictions were universally upheld. Universally upheld.
We got what we need, but they want us to pull them and then restrict them. I don't see that's possible.
What we need,
I don't think I have to
Dr. Turner, Mr. Gator, what we need is some kind of commitment from the board and from the district that you will continue to work with the city, continue to communicate with the city, to have a dialogue like this with the city so that you can come to a resolution together. We can support either side, but we can't make the decision.
I couldn't agree with you. And we have had an ongoing, very good relationship with our schools and our parents through the schools for many, many, many years, as long as I've been associated with the district. And I'm sorry for all of the controversy that's arisen about this. And I am surprised about the deed restriction on this particular school. The board's made a commitment on that, and we'll move forward and live with it. That's the best we can do. I do not believe the other is appropriate at all. And I don't think they do either. So I'm trying to work something where there's more confidence and more trust. But it is an ongoing thing. You have to prove that on an ongoing basis. Okay? And that's what leadership is about.
How do you propose to start beginning those discussions with the city?
That is right. That's where I'd like to go next, but with your blessing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean,
We said that then, and when I spoke to Dion, that we would make a recommendation. We may not have that all tonight from this discussion, and neither would you, and if the city were sitting here at the table, neither would they. But we do think with other items we've seen, I go back to, you need to sort of take that chart, and we didn't get that far yet because we're all volunteers.
Right.
And look at the other things you've done. I think what happens over a period of time, for the same reason that you said you go back and look at prior resolutions. Originally, when the Daniel Island Committee started, we've never said we wanted to secede from Berkeley County Schools. We give you an A+. An A+ on your academic delivery or educational program. I've seen the principal out when a youngster missed the school bus, out there helping the parent. They're tremendous people. But in terms of going back to that, they went and looked, and they understood first by looking through the minutes that there was an agreement for a K-8 school that was forgotten. And then it wasn't in the deed, but it was in the shared use agreement, which is also, recordable. So in that shared use agreement, maybe there's a little more flexibility to deal with some of these issues here and come back together. We'd sit in with you if we could, one or two of us. For what is the requirement of the school district for the impact on infrastructure and roads from a school going in, and then let's work together. Would Berkeley County participate? Nobody's ever asked them, would they participate? We could use the support for future walking trails with you guys, and we can come back and go with you to the state and say, you've got to come up with who's responsible for what and share the wealth. And come back and yes, you need some of the surplus money and a change in that. But if you took that list back and broke it down on the most recent, what you did with Kane Hoy for the high school, for the road going in, that value versus the value of what you need for this. The city's contract offer, which I can only tell you it's substantially less that they're asking for than what it was appraised at, and it's in keeping with their promise. in the area of selling at conservation value. The rezoning is already done per the RFP. So I think there's more. We just needed to maybe cool off and come back to the table again after looking at all of these things. And I said to Dion, yes, we will carry back a recommendation. Some of the members are here tonight, and we thank the board members for being here.
You want to wrap up for us, Herman?
Well, I think that public discussion is always good. Democracies are best run by benevolent dictators, but because the process of a democracy can sometimes be messy. But in all instances, it's the one system that works. I think that the district has enough input now to go in and meet with whoever we need to meet with, the city, the county, whoever, and come up with the kind of language that provides some cover for the community and at the same time gives the board the ability to work inside of what they're charged with doing. So if there is nothing else, then we thank you for your attendance.
I'd like to ask one or two more.
We'll be in
Sorry.
touch. Sure.
I'm sorry. We're sitting here. Let's have a conversation. We didn't accomplish diddly squat like we've done every time we've been together. I'm getting old. I might not be here for our next meeting. Come on, guys. Look, I've offered to take the school board and the city out to dinner to get this resolved multiple times. Okay? I would love to hear, and I thank you, Dr. Turner, for stepping up for the school board. And Dr. Thompson did that many times with our city administrator, and that never went anyplace. Every time Dr. Thompson agreed to something, it went back. I just want to know, and believe it or not, these are two people I really respect on a school board, okay? Are we off base too far? Can we just ask you that? Are we that far off base? Is there something that we have to do? Can we be prepared? Meetings don't solve problems. Meetings don't solve problems if we're just going to walk out every time someone's have another one.
Board members cannot negotiate. Okay?
Board members what?
Board members cannot negotiate. We're a
I'm not
one-point-
asking you to negotiate. I'm only asking
We
you.
we have to let them do all the negotiations. They bring it to us.
And then we say no all the time, at least for the last 2 years.
A great deal got accomplished on December 10th
Yep.
at the rezoning hearing between Mayor Blackwell, Doug Cooper, Kent Murray, Mike Sally, I believe, was there, and I think Kevin Cox was there. The issue that came down to was, or I got your report card, if you had an incomplete report, they just didn't have from the developer the amendment to the PUD that reduced the number of residential units to be offset by the school. If that had been there that night, it would have been done there. And if we could do it for that side of Bowen, I'm sure things can be done together to make a recommendation to see if there's something to work out that Dr. Turner can then take back to the full board and Mr. Cribb can take back.
Mr. Gaither said, we can't predict 5 years down the road what Hanahan's going to look like. As a board member, I have to think I cannot obligate a board to something that they can't honor down the road 5 years from now, 10 years from now. If it's something that we can, that is not going to be an earth-changing thing, I can agree with that. Now, and it's just like he's saying, the resolution. I would love to be able to sit here and promise you all that from now to eternity, I can't. And I can't obligate a board to do that.
And you have been truthful on that even with prior votes, and I'm going to let everybody know that that's the way you've been all along, and I appreciate that, and I respected that. But I just can't see us, okay, so we sat around, we talked for an hour.
No, but I think out of that comes language. That is where we are at the point now. The language that the district has to find that they can live with, the language that the city can live with, and I think that's where you have a meeting of minds at this point. And it's probably technical, but at the same time, it has to cover all of the concerns that have been expressed.
What language have, but I don't think
respectfully, that's where we've been for probably a year now, is on this language. And you know, I mean, we've had contracts in front of the board that have been voted on, we've had contracts in front of city council, they've all been different language. So what have we accomplished tonight, I guess is the overarching question, to get further with that language?
I think
I'm with Bill, I don't see that we've gotten.
Okay, I think Dr. Turner has expressed what the district's reservation with the existing language for us, and so forth. You have said what is it you want to be protected both at the elementary school and at the other Hanahan schools. I think that's what we've done. That is out in the open.
It's been out in the open for 2 years.
Well,
And I apologize for putting you in this position.
no, I mean, I'm fine.
Okay. And I apologize
So the district,
this is where it's been.
If I can just, my understanding was that the contract 3, I think that was sent to the district, that my understanding was that the deed restriction did not include the deeds on the other schools.
Yes, it did.
My understanding was that the deed restriction on the elementary school just included attendance in the Hanahan school, but it didn't actually have any sort of restrictions on the deeds of those schools.
Right. No. 3, excuse me, go ahead, Deanna.
Option 3 did. Option 3A, which was voted on that night of March 10th at the board meeting, option 3A did not include the existing schools. But option 3 did include the new side as well as the 3 existing schools.
It included the deed restrictions on those schools and not just, okay.
So for clarity, 3 was the 4-4 vote that just got disappeared, and then 3A was the 5-3.
That's correct.
Okay. Right. Just make sure we're right on our numbers too.
So can we commit to at least tonight a date to meet?
A date when the district and the
City will meet.
I'm hoping that'll be real soon.
No, my language, that's not good enough.
Oh.
Can we commit to a date? We've been doing this for 2 years.
I can commit to a date with the city because I will call and
I
try
have
to
a
get
question. I'm sorry.
Can we hold for a second? I'm sorry.
I will try as quickly as I can to set up a date to talk with city officials. I will. Okay?
Do you want representatives from the Citizens Committee to be there with you?
I don't have any objection to that at all. I don't think we need the whole group. That's not really the
No. We said 2 people or
So if
something.
you would do it, we'll figure something out. Okay?
Do you want us to arrange it or?
No, I will take care of it. Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
I just have one quick question. I want to know, what good does a meeting do if there's no contract that's already been submitted that they can discuss? If we've already agreed to take the deed restriction down to just the elementary school, then
We
why
haven't agreed to that.
You have not agreed to that.
That's the problem. The sticking
Why
point
have you not
here
agreed
is,
to that? It makes no sense. I mean, not all citizens agree with you guys.
and that's fine, the commitment, and it's not us guys, it was the commitment of the district that all Hanahan kids go to Hanahan schools, okay? We agreed to that and everybody else.
That can be written in the contract without having a deed restriction.
And the contract, according to Mr. Sally, would be,
According to the lawyers.
according to the lawyers.
Contracts, yeah, well,
Here in 5 years.
But we, you know what, we promised we wouldn't do questions until afterwards.
and-
Please come to us, we'll stay here.
and we've reached that we understand that part, that a contract is only good for the 2-year period of where the school's finished in the 2 years, those things are fine.
Contract is fine for as long as the contract.
But I think the other part there would be that if you guys can get together, we'd be
Well,
more
that would be
than
the next
happy.
step, as soon as possible, to have the meeting with the
And
district.
the other consideration, maybe, you are all very intelligent people, our city council and our administrator is, we from our backgrounds in business, we're in the same boat. A process might also be an answer to how to resolve this in a policy. Policies can be changed by the board too. Yes, there are road boards, and yes, there are those who went back. And for Daniel, we looked at it. We want to make sure that there's something there and there's some guidance for the future to that.
I understand. Okay. Thank you, sir.